Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into one of the most incredible and honestly, one of the most tragically short-lived social experiments in all of American history. We're talking about the fight for Black education right after the Civil War. So, let's just start with a quote that gets right to the heart of everything. This is what Frederick Douglass's enslaver, Mr. Auld, said about teaching him how to read. And wow, does it lay bare a fundamental truth of the entire system of slavery. Education wasn't just frowned upon, it was seen as a direct threat. An educated mind, you see, was a free mind, and that was a truly dangerous idea. And look, this wasn't just some slave owner's personal opinion. No, this was policy. This was the law. It was a deliberate strategy to maintain absolute control over millions of human beings. I mean, think about that for a second. It was literally a crime across the South to teach a Black person to read or write. You could be fined, whipped, even thrown in prison for it. And these laws were strictly enforced, creating this system of forced ignorance designed to dehumanize and control everyone, even free Black people. And the result of all this? Well, it was absolutely devastating. Even 15 years after the Civil War, more than 3/4 of the Black population in the South still couldn't read or write. This staggering number wasn't some accident. It was the goal. It was a massive wall built to block economic opportunity, political power, and real, true freedom. But then, out of the chaos and ashes of the Civil War, something pretty radical happens. A federal experiment is launched to tackle this crisis head-on. And right at the heart of this whole thing was this new federal agency, the Freedmen's Bureau. Congress created it to manage the massive social shift of emancipation. And pretty quickly, a huge part of its mission became all about education. And the sheer scale of what the Bureau did was just unbelievable. They weren't just writing checks for books. We're talking about building an entire educational system from scratch. They were coordinating teachers coming down from the north, setting up buildings, and this is crucial. They were using the U.S. Army to protect these schools and teachers from violent attacks. This mission to educate eventually became the Bureau's biggest and most important job. Now, this is so important. The Bureau wasn't pushing this on anyone. No way. They were trying to keep up with this absolute tidal wave of demand. Army reports from the time are just filled with these stories of formerly enslaved people, kids, adults, grandparents, all of them clamoring for a chance to learn. They saw literacy as the key to everything. So, okay, this all leads to the big question, right? Did any of it actually work? After generations of being violently denied an education, could this brief experiment really move the needle? I mean, seriously, could this massive federal push, combined with this intense hunger to learn, actually produce results you could measure? Could literacy finally start to take root? Well, the data from the 1870 census gives us a pretty clear answer. It's pretty amazing, actually. When you compare the counties that had Freedmen's Bureau schools to the ones that didn't, the impact on literacy rates for Black kids is just undeniable. In fact, when you really dig into the numbers, the simple presence of a Bureau school in a county boosted literacy rates for Black children by a staggering 35%. That is a direct, powerful, and frankly massive impact. And it goes even deeper than just being able to read. The Bureau's presence more than doubled the rate of kids actually attending school. So they weren't just teaching literacy. They were building a culture of education where one had been completely outlawed. But, and this is the tragic part of the story, this incredible moment of progress, it didn't last. The political wind shifted back in Washington, and the entire experiment was taken apart almost as quickly as it was built. You can see it right here on the timeline. The Bureau's main educational push really only lasted a handful of years. By 1868, they were already winding it down, and by 1871, thanks to intense political opposition, the money for education was completely cut off, just gone. So, with the federal government gone, who gets control of all these new schools? Well, they were handed over to the very same southern state governments that, less than 10 years earlier, had made it a felony to teach Black people anything. You can just imagine how incredibly precarious that situation was. So with the feds out of the picture, this huge debate opens up. And it's a debate that even happened within the Black community itself about, what is the whole point of education anyway? And this debate was really personified by two giants. On one hand, you had Booker T. Washington, He argued for a strategy of self-help, focusing on industrial skills, farming, trades, things to build economic power from the ground up. But then you had W.E.B. Du Bois, who said, whoa, hold on, that is not enough. He argued for immediate political action and for creating what he called the talented 10th, a class of college-educated leaders who would fight for full civil rights. So really, it all boiled down to this one fundamental question, a question that would shape Black education for the next 100 years. Is the goal to create a skilled workforce, or is it to empower full citizens? So you might be thinking, with the whole thing cut short, did any of it even matter in the long run? Oh, absolutely. The impact was profound, and it lasted for generations. Research has shown that the sons of the men who went to those early schools had much better economic outcomes decades later. That tiny little window of opportunity created benefits that echoed for half a century. And that just leaves us with this one big, lingering question. If just a few short years of investment could do that much good, could have such a powerful, lasting effect, what might the landscape of America look like today if that experiment hadn't been cut short? It's a heavy question, and it really highlights the immense long-term cost of a promise broken.